Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this exclusive webcast on overhauling L&D to thrive in the digital age, being disruption ready as a run-up to the People Matters Learning and Development Conference 2023 that we're hosting in person on the 13th of April FM on Singapore. I'm Pallavi Verma, Senior Editor, People Matters, and I'm excited to be your host for the day. Skills that are relevant today may become redundant tomorrow with the onslaught of advanced technologies. In such a dynamic business environment, how can organizations stay ahead of the curve? During this discussion, we will explore the top trends, learning needs for the companies in Southeast Asia, and how they can tackle new age business challenges. What are the necessary steps that L&D professionals should take to match skill demands, and what are some of the most critical skills that may require leaders to increase their investment in building new capabilities? For those who are still joining us, I would like to extend my welcome once again and really would like to know from where you're all joining us and what are your expectations from this session. So do comment in the chat section where you're joining from, and let's see how many places we've managed to reach. Well, let's start this discussion. Thank you for being part of this discussion. And we'll also be, just a gentle reminder, since we'll also be taking questions from our audiences, request everyone to share their questions, your comments, anything that you wish to ask from our leaders in the chat box. We'll keep an eye on the comment section and would really love to listen to your thoughts. It's time now for welcoming our speakers. We have with us Nick Shackleton-Jones, CEO and founder, Shackleton Consulting. Welcome, Nick.
Hi, it's great to be here, and good afternoon or good morning wherever you are.
Would like to take a moment to say a few lines about Nick. Besides being a prolific speaker, Nick is the author of How People Learn Designing Performance. He's responsible for coining the courses to resources shift, the first general theory of learning, and the effective context model, and the 5DI human-centered learning design approach. Happy to have you, Nick, on this discussion.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Also joining us is Jennifer Paling-Tan, Vice President, Learning and Transformation, Group Human Resources, OCBC Bank. Very warm welcome, Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. Very happy to be here.
Nick and Jennifer both will be sharing their insights on the different challenges, the trends, and the top skills that will define the future of learning and development in this new work environment and how this is impacting the way businesses are transforming themselves. Without further ado, let's start off the session. And to begin with, let me put a question on the trends. So I'll start with you, Jennifer. What are some of the key trends you've identified that you think are shaping the future landscape of L&D?
Well, I was going to ask you to ask Nick first. No.
The question is for both of you. Yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
I have like 10 slides prepared on the trends. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, but I think, I just wanted to this is a conversation about disruption. So as any good and smart human being would do, I asked ChatGPT. So how many of you would like to hear what ChatGPT says, right? Okay. And I'll wrap up also with ChatGPT's recommendation, but a poem about the trend shaping L&D landscape in the future. But according to ChatGPT, personalized learning is important, micro learning is important. And by the way, when they talk about personalized learning by ChatGPT, it gave itself a little call out to say AI is really important. And, then gamification as well as mobile learning and data-driven learning. So that's ChatGPT's answer, right? But I think one very important thing is, does everybody know what are the limits of ChatGPT's intelligence at the moment? What's the data set and the limits of the data set and the trained data answers that ChatGPT gives? Anyone has any idea? You can populate the chat. But very quickly, I'll just share with you that it's very important to know ChatGPT's intelligence or data is scraped up to November 2021 of everything that is available. So asking ChatGPT to predict what are the future L&D landscape trends, I think we have to take it critically. So to this end, I would say it's very, very important that we realize that human beings are no longer the most intelligent species on Earth. I think that's one very, very important future trend and a mindset shift that we have to be very, very aware of. How we conceive of human beings, and therefore our role as an L&D professional is going to change significantly with that mindset shift. We very often, I think, we take for granted, right, that human beings are the most intelligent life form. And more so, this particular assumption is being challenged by disruptive technology. So first and foremost, I'd like us to think about the future trends, right, or trends that shape the future of L&D landscape starts with us reimagining who we are, what is our purpose, what's the value add that we bring. Amidst all the geopolitical trends, amidst all the human capital behavioral economics, amidst all the new technologies and the ways we work, I think that's a very, very important mindset shift that we have to grapple with. That would be my contribution to kick off this conversation.
Nick?
Yes, I'm just going to repeat everything that Dr. Tan said. No, I'm kidding, but I love that you led with ChatGPT, which is such an interesting and topical thing, and I'm sure we'll talk about that some more today. I guess my perspective is that there are three areas of significant change: the nature of work, the nature of the workforce, and the nature of the workplace. So the work is changing for reasons that Dr. Tan described, not least because of automation and AI. The workforce is changing. Your workforce as an organization, you'll have to consider the split between permanent staff and contingent staff. And probably the trend is towards having a more contingent sort of task rabbit type environment. You're also looking at a demographic shift in your organizations. I know that Southeast Asia is very diverse in terms of languages and cultures, but in many countries, a big proportion of the workforce is younger, and that will bring some stresses and strains. And then the workplace is changing. Many of us, obviously, including ourselves, have been impacted by the pandemic, many more people working from home more often. And so if I sort of bring this into focus and bring it to life for L&D people, when I was working in one of the big four, one of the professional services firm, prior to the pandemic, the way that people were learning their jobs is we would offer them a job, and they would turn up at this big glass and steel building in central London, and they would probably spend 6 months to a year. You know, they're straight out of university, but they go to meetings and they dress like, you know, dress in a suit, and they watch how people talk and they learn how people behave. And it takes them all that time to learn how to do their job. And now I see them on the other end of a Zoom call like this, and they're sitting at home in their parents' house with bunk beds behind them. And we're sending them out to audit clients, big banks. And we think, ooh, how are they going to learn now? How are they going to feel connected to the organization in this new world? So big trends in those three areas: work, workforce, workplace, I think, to grapple with, and big implications for L&D, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Actually, one of the, I have been ruminating about this a lot about, 75% based on a global workforce report recently across about 40 countries talked about 75% of companies facing talent shortage and difficulty in hiring. And 85 million global talent is predicted to be in shortage, right, by 2030. And I think all the more important is the role and is the place of learning professionals, right? Especially in terms of, we know from data that strong learning organizations report 3 times higher motivation, higher retention, higher productivity, 3 times more innovation, profitability, sustainability, and 4 times more change responsiveness. And what we hear from our businesses and our business leaders, what do they expect of L&D professionals, right, amidst this landscape? Very much so. We looked at top 3 priorities, and this is from a survey of business leaders within OCBC. From our case, is business transformation and growth, right? How can L&D play a significant role, not only in the delivery and the design of powerful learning programs, but how does this translate and add value to business transformation and growth, right? How business leaders are also asking for the second top priority. How do we increase the attractiveness of the company as a great place to work in the face of talent shortage? As we know now, culture is the new paycheck. And how do we provide, through our value add, a faster response to changing business conditions of the nature that Nick and I alluded to earlier. Yeah, these are very, very critical trends about the critical space with which we are seen to be having an important role and a significant role to play.
Sure,
I think
sure.
that's such an interesting thing. And Pallavi, I think it almost begins to go into the next question I think you're going to ask, which I think what you say, Dr. Tan, is absolutely right, is there's a war for talent. Organizations are increasingly trying to attract and struggling to attract the best talent. If I take my kind of professional services example, um, it's one thing to attract people to a big London job in a fancy building. It's another if you're going to be sitting at home on Zoom calls like you're working in a call center, not meeting people, not traveling the world. The employee value proposition is changing quite radically in this landscape. And amongst the statistics you mentioned, I know in Southeast Asia, in addition, there has been, as is the case in many parts of the world, quite a challenge around engagement, which is dropping and dropping significantly. I'm always keen in these conversations to talk very practically. And so, Dr. Tan, you talked about, what L&D needs to do. And I would highlight two things. The first is, contrary to what ChatGPT might say, I think reskilling and upskilling is not the challenge. I think de-skilling and downskilling is the challenge. Because if you're going to live in a world where everybody is going to be with you for a shorter and shorter time, you don't want to be spending more and more of that time training them. You want to create jobs which are plug and play, which anybody can do, like Uber. Just sit in the car, follow the system, you'll do great. So using AI, for example, to create performance guidance systems like a sat nav or GPS for every job, so that anybody of low levels of capability can immediately do that job really well. That I think is really important. And so L&D can play a big role there. And the second, to your point, Dr. Tan, around attraction, um, what are people attracted to? I don't think they're attracted to the idea of sitting in classrooms. When people talk about learning and development being part of the attraction, I think this generation are interested in experiences. In a world where experience is being damaged by everything being digital and Zoom and so on, L&D, I think, have a rare opportunity to create magical, fantastic experiences for people, where they get together and they feel a sense of belonging and they do something remarkable that they want to post on social media and tell everybody what a great company this is because they got us together and we did this thing. And so L&D can do that. It can do those two things. It can create performance support, performance guidance, and it can create wonderful experiences that make people feel that sense of belonging. So I think those are two things that we can do to help tackle that.
Yeah,
Sure, and thank
these,
you for bringing up the topic of culture and experiences. But I just want to take a quick question from Jennifer, talking about the changes and the learning needs. If you were to enumerate the top learning needs for South Asian companies, what would those be?
I think firstly, when we talk about learning need, I'd like to just maybe follow on from where Nick is talking about, exactly because culture and the workplace is so important. The culture, the experience is really important. Knowing our audience is very important. I think to leap to immediately what skills are needed and what are the top learning needs would be jumping a little bit quickly, because L&D, being with our legacy, often thinks about what's the curriculum, what's the content, what's the skill. Tell me what are your needs right now from a business perspective, and then delivering to that. But I'd like to call out that it's really important, and a lot of our work at OCBC is to design no longer the program or the content, but designing for connections. To Nick's point, how do we design for connections? How do we design for community? We're not designing programs anymore. We're designing for communities. Exactly to the point, how do we design for belonging? How do we design for the connections, I think, that create an intrinsic motivation that stimulates discretionary effort because they feel a sense of purpose, a sense of fulfillment, a sense of the ability to leave a mark and make a difference. I think we first and foremost are catering. I call it the want it all generation, right? And I put myself in that generation as well. I think for a long time there has been comments or labels given to the new workforce, the new generation, other than millennials and baby boomers. I think one that everyone is very familiar with is the strawberry generation. People say, "Oh, you're liking a little bit more resilient," but I've been thinking about this, right? And I think I call it the want it all generation. Why are we the want it all generation? It's very odd. They're like walking paradoxes, right? Because number one, everyone's looking for autonomy, yes? And on the other hand, I don't know if you've heard a recent case in India, maybe our colleagues and friends from India will share with us more, that there was a very recent practice about well-being, and there's a forced laptop shutdown at 6 p.m., right? So many, while they want autonomy, also want the organization to shut down their laptops for them, to give them license to not be plugged in, right? So they want both autonomy and they want, where it suits them, the license to log off, okay? The license to say, oh, tell me how much should I work, right? There is also a sense of people who want, for instance, belonging, community, give me a chance to contribute, hear my voice. And on the other hand, especially in high power distance cultures, we hear a lot of people say, give me the safety. Well, safety is created and fearlessness is an equal important ingredient to psychological safety. So there is, and there are many more examples like this. So I think it's very important to know that we do serve a very diverse workforce who, because of the seasons of life and growing up in largely more affluent countries now, are used to a sense of I want everything. I want it very personalized. I want it to suit my needs when I want them. Um, I think within this, the most important learning need in OCBC that we have distilled, of course, there are technical skills, digital, literacies are particularly important. How do you interact with AI now? How do you do, there are new skills called prompt engineering, right? How do you engineer prompts to get the best? And how do you interact with augmented technologies? There are technical skills like that. I think leadership skills continue to be very, very important. But in OCBC, what we call and coin a meta competency, a most important learning need, and this is also to Nick's point, is the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn, which we call learning agility power. And we have, and we call that a meta skill because the disruption's just very, very fast now, right? And out of learn, unlearn, and relearn, I know we have used this a lot and it's a buzzword, but we have in fact codified it, scientifically informed, to two mindsets and four muscles, right? Growth mindset, productive failure mindset, and buttressing these mindsets are four very practical muscles that we have to keep exercising in a continuous growth journey, right? Which is resilience, resourcefulness, reciprocity, knowing when and how to seek help and give help, and very importantly, reflectiveness. So learning agility power, which we define to be knowing what to do when you don't know what to do, right? Borrows from Jean Piaget's work on fluid intelligence. So knowing what to do when we don't know what to do, that is what we are tending to as the prioritized learning need across our business today.
Thank you for summarizing it so beautifully. And let me just move on to the next question. We're talking of belongingness and creating that connect. So I want to hear from you, Nick. What are some of the big steps L&D professionals are taking to align the capabilities and match the big demands of both talent as well as business?
Yes, and I should say it's a pleasure to be on a call with Dr. Tan, who gives such excellent answers and provides a foundation on which I can build. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I think I'm going to focus on three areas, I think, all of which you touched on: induction, leadership, and thirdly, talent. So the first, in terms of belongingness, your point, Pallavi, when people join, that's a critical time. It will cost you. as a business. They will leave if they don't feel that kind of sense of belonging. And I've done a lot of work building induction programs for different organizations, everything from big banks through to United Nations. And interestingly, when I do the audience analysis, the number one thing that determines the difference between a good start and a sense of belonging and a poor one is having a buddy or a mentor or a person who is close to you. So I think you made that point, Dr. Tan. It's not about specific content or curriculum. It's about the support and the community. So putting people in a relationship right at the start, creating that sense of belonging, creating networking events, getting people together, that can make such a difference to your bottom line, whether people stay or whether they go, whether they feel like they're part of something or not. I think the second area Dr. Tan touched on as well, which is leadership. It's a very different world to lead. Leaders play such a role in people's experience of coming to work. If you have a bad leader, it rains every day for you. Every day you come to work, it's miserable because you think, here we go again with this leader. So having leaders who can create that psychological safety, who can connect you to the organizational mission, who understand how to do that and engage people remotely, which is a different skill. So leadership capability is super important, building those capabilities and selecting the right people for those roles. And lastly, not least, talent. So Dr. Tan touched on personalization, and it's a bit of a buzzword. What does it mean? Well, at a very simple level, you have a job to do. Everybody in your organizations has a job to do, but the competency model that the HR team have probably doesn't tell you very much at all about that job. So many organizations are moving away from, competency-based models towards skills-based models. And a way the skills-based model is different is every skill should be pinned against a specific task. So if part of your job is hammering in nails, that's a task, and there's a skill associated with that. And that enables the learning team to create much smaller, much more personalized learning elements that actually relate to your work. And they're not just things inflicted on you by the HR team. They're actual bits of content. They might be resources, not courses, which help you with the job that you have to do. And you can have intelligent personalization. I'll give you a very simple example of that. When I joined a big professional services firm, I had to do 3 days worth of compliance modules. And a lot of it wasn't relevant to the job I had to do. It was just a sheep dip. This is a waste of my time. This is a waste of the company's money, and it's not really very helpful to me, frankly. But if we know as an organization exactly what tasks I have to do, we can personalize that journey so that I'm only learning about stuff which is relevant for my job. So I think those three things, looking at the support, the belonging that people kind of get when they join, looking at the support and belonging that's created by leaders, but also fine-tuning the talent model so that it's actually based around tasks and skills, not broad competencies, means that the learning offer is much more relevant to me and much more personalized.
Well, that brings me to, ask what are some of the challenges which leaders are facing when it comes to building those that culture of learning and growth? So, if Nick, you want to add something before I move on to Jane.
Yeah, absolutely. They don't know how to do it. I think, frankly, because I don't know if you're sitting watching this, probably your experience has been quite similar. I lived through the pandemic, through working, as I say, for one of the big four, and pretty soon we began saying as a company, we shouldn't be getting people into the office just to show them PowerPoint slides. Okay, so we shouldn't be bringing everybody together at big cost and complexity. Just we're going to sit them in a room and somebody's going to show them a PowerPoint deck, and because we can do that online. So there was a lot of rethinking about why do we get people together? Why do managers and leaders get people together in a room? Why do we as a company bring our clients into a room? And what do we do in that room when we get them there? And I think this is a big challenge for leaders because we've always wanted them to be more involved in creating culture. We've always wanted them to be more involved in developing people, but we're going to have to equip them with the tools and capabilities that they need to do that, because they've depended too much in the past on just getting people together and just showing a slide deck as a way of working. And that has to change. So they have to understand better ways, both of working remotely with teams, focusing less on presenteeism and more on productivity, actually looking at outputs of people's work. And also, they're going to have to be much better when they get people together at creating great experiences for people and supporting people and playing a more collaborative, instrumental role in creating collaboration and culture. And that's quite a big shift. It is a big shift.
Right,
So, yeah.
right. So, Jennifer, would you agree if I say that there are companies who have the intention, they probably want to do it, but as Nick said, they don't know how to do it. In your perspective, what are some of the critical skills organizations should or must invest in to be able to lead off and stay ahead of the curve tomorrow?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I don't think the question is, are there any organizations that are facing this challenge? Are there not any? I think most are. And if anyone's telling you that they're not facing this challenge and they know what to do and they have, the best tools and all the right answers to creating this culture, they're probably lying. Definitely, I think all organizations and all the more leaders right now are faced with more and more situations where they do not know what to do. I think the most important thing is, firstly, acknowledging the problem statement, that this is where we want to go, right, and this is the culture that we want to achieve. Touch the important points and then acknowledge that together we can co-create this culture, together we can co-create this transformation. And I think learning professionals are critical in this facilitation role. I absolutely believe it wholeheartedly, because learning, culture, experience are all created by design. I mean, primarily by design. Of course, learning occurs by chance, culture occurs also by chance. But if it was all by chance, we would be out of a job. No, but I absolutely believe very firmly that learning occurs by design, culture occurs by design. And I think to me, I was reflecting on what Nick was saying. Two quotes come to me, right? That it's really important. What people need now more and more so, and you know, what we need really is not knowledge, but wisdom, right? Discernment. What is wisdom and discernment? I think there is something, a motto I hold close to my heart. By Confucius mentioned this, and I think Socrates mentioned this, all in different forms, in different parts of their work, was about, knowledge is knowing something, right? And wisdom is really knowing what you don't know. So I think first and foremost, we need to know what we don't know and acknowledge that we don't know it, and then co-create that. So that's the first thing I would say. Very, very important, that we acknowledge and be confident, be secure, be wise enough to know what we don't know, so that we can work towards and design together a future that we all want. Really as a collective. Some challenges I really see in this journey of change and transformation, to the problem statements we're discussing today, is that enterprises have to move from an enterprise thinking to an ecosystem thinking. Right. I know these are big words, and I'm so glad I'm on the same panel as Nick, because he can flank me with all the pragmatics, right? So thank you so much, Nick. But if I could give us some organizing categories, and then I would land on one very pragmatic mechanism that we're working on in shaping culture. So first and foremost, I think thinking. Moving away from enterprise, leaders need to know that we're moving away from an enterprise model to an ecosystem model. These are not new, but it's really upon us right now, and we really need to stretch the thinking. We don't know very well how to move and how to play in an ecosystem model, right? Number two is we are very strong, and particularly Asian countries, I know, and Asian high performing education countries, right, are very strong in procedural skills. All our young talents come out from school and from the K-12 and higher education, being very strong in procedural thinking, but not very strong in relational, kind of work at all, relational being. Right. So how do we move from more procedural knowledge to relational knowledge? I think that's another critical point, that we don't know much about, but we really need to move in there and play in that space. right? How do we move, like Nick was saying, away from a compliance culture? Singapore is a classic case, right? You can't U-turn unless people tell you that you can U-turn. And that's not the same in the US and in the UK. You can U-turn anytime. You don't U-turn when, there's a sign that tells you not to U-turn. But we're highly compliant. So how do you move from a compliant mindset really to an autonomous mindset or self-determined mindset? It's very complex, the journey of change, right? And in all organizations that want to thrive economically, which is very important, the priority has always been on performance. How do you shift from performance to purposeful engagement? Right? I'll touch on more of this another time, in my talk at the conference. And the last one, I think we've always been thinking about efficiency and effectiveness. How do we move away from that to think about impact and contribution? If we design to ecosystem, to relationships, to autonomy, to purposeful engagement, to impact and contribution, I think we are moving in the right direction. So for us at OCBC, I promised a pragmatic tool. We are really thinking about culture is shaped by language. We have this thing called Learnish, right? Which we coined as part of driving and developing learning agility. I see a question about learning agility is teaching the language of growth. And that language you carry with you, right? In every meeting that you hold, right? In every post-mortem debriefing, in every weekly touch base, right? And how do you bring a language of growth and how do you bring Learnish, okay, to the table in the everyday work that we do? I think Learnish would be one very, very important way. Learning the language of growth, right, is one thing that we are working towards. And this is something that we are co-creating and developing alongside our business leaders as well, so that we can move towards sustainable growth and really an engaging culture and experience for our employees and our workforce.
I would love to listen to you all day, but in the interest of time, we'll have to take a few more questions from the audiences. And just a quick reminder to everyone, if you want to ask any questions from both our speakers, do put it in the comment box. We've already started getting some questions, but let me move on to the last question for Nick, which would be, thanks for bringing up the importance of tools and technologies, but I want to take this one from Nick. What are some of the innovations in L&D technologies that organizations are experimenting or would like to experiment in the near future?
It's a good question, and I think it's one of the ones that I often talk about because it's badly interpreted. And so I'm going to start by saying that new technology applied to old thinking is not progress. And I've seen this in my career. I've now spent probably 35 years in L&D. At the beginning of my career, everybody was saying that e-learning is the next big thing. It's going to revolutionize training. It's going to make it possible for people to learn any time, any place, anywhere. Nobody noticed, by the way, that any place and anywhere are the same thing. But it didn't. It was a catastrophe, and people hated e-learning. It ended up just being used for compliance training. And then we said, oh, e-learning was a disaster. So we've got a new technology approach. We're going to chop the e-learning modules into smaller pieces. We're going to call it micro-learning, and then everybody will love it. And everybody bought these big learning libraries of micro-learning, and nobody now uses them. This is the reality. And it's like, oh, okay, so what are we going to do now? And some companies are saying, oh, we're going to use AI systems to constantly push you little bits of learning the whole time that you're trying to work. And you have to step back from this and say, this is madness. The technology is not going to save you. The only thing that will save you is a different way of thinking about what you're trying to do. So let me kind of sketch that out. So I think in terms of innovation, the big thing and the big thing I push is human-centered learning design. If we were developing any other product, we would take the time to talk to our customers and understand what they really need and how we can make their lives better. But because education doesn't do that, we haven't been doing it in L&D. We've just been building curricula, putting topics in courses, and pushing more and more stuff, dumping more content on people. And AI is not going to make that a better experience. Talking to people is going to make that a better experience. Really find out how you can help people and what they need. So what will be the potential opportunity for things like ChatGPT and AI, for example? Well, there's a bad way to go and a good way to go. The bad way to go is to use AI to just summarize and crunch down more and more content and then force feed it to your audience and your population. That will look like a more efficient model, but it won't be more effective, and people will continue to dislike it. The good thing that you can do is, well, what you have in your car, GPS. When I started out my career, and some of you on this call may be old enough to remember this world, there was no GPS, there was no sat nav. You had to have a map. You had to get a map out. You had to highlight the route and memorize the route, and getting places was super complicated. And then GPS came along, and it just made your life easier because it could say turn left, turn right. And we can create a kind of GPS for every role in our organizations. We can create performance support, checklists, guidance, resources, one-page guides. And with the benefit of automation and AI, we can start to translate that into performance guidance, systems that say, oh, you're about to have a meeting about the maternity policy. Here's the 3 steps that summarize what you should talk about or questions you should ask. We can create systems that help leaders and new starts to perform, shorten their time to competence, deliver for organization, require less training to do the job. And so that's a huge opportunity for us as organizations. How do we better support people with performance support and performance guidance systems? So I think that's a big opportunity. The other one I think is VR. It's quite interesting. I came from an oil and gas background. There are real applications for VR. So, for example, escaping a burning oil rig. So I think depending on your organization, there may be opportunities to use what will be increasingly consumerized products such as VR. I know that Apple's bringing out a VR headset, I think in October, to actually give people chances to have real experiences at low cost, to get together in a room with people, to do something really exciting and challenging, to practice things in a way that can be done digitally. So I think that's quite exciting, but it's still a little way ahead of us. So I'll stop there.
Sure. In fact, what you just mentioned or summarized, there's a question related, so maybe you can take that up, Nick. The question reads: With emerging technologies and next-gen platforms, will the focus for employees' experience shift from formal learning to 360-degree employee growth, and how can AI technologies play a role in the overall employee experience?
Yeah, I think they can play a role in just making it a seamless experience. It should be a way to make your job and your life more seamless, not more disrupted. You don't want an AI companion who's constantly pushing, do this module, do this thing, look at this thing. You want an AI companion that just helps you, along the way, that holds your hand. I think that VR again can complement that, can create a great experience. But look, you mentioned the magic word, Pallavi, formal. The reality is that L&D is only playing in a tiny fraction of the learning space. We're often creating courses, formal kind of education. And as some of you know, 70-20-10, almost all of the real learning is happening as people are challenged by the job. This is what is driving people's learning, is that the challenges they have with the jobs they have to do, right? And we are not there to help them. So there are 2 things that we can do to make more of an impact. The first is to talk to people, understand what challenges they have on the jobs when they join, for example, or when they become a leader. What challenges do you have? And create things that will help them with the challenges that they have. We're not doing that because we're not talking to them. That would be a big, big help. And the second thing that we can do is we can create opportunities for them to practice, to get together in a real space, to feel excited and to learn by doing something hands-on, and to actually experience not just that feeling of togetherness and belonging, but also to be challenged. Don't get people together in a classroom. Stop doing that. It's terrible. It's a waste of their time. It's a waste of yours. But get people together to do something which is challenging, and you'll see the benefits from that.
Well, we'll take up one more question there in the interest of time. So that question probably, Jennifer, you can take that up. Speaking about agility, how can we help leaders quickly make sense of the ever-evolving business world and transform them into effective change managers?
Yeah, I think I've spoken to this earlier, and what we did is, or at least one thing that we're helping. Again, I call out to Learnish. How can we empower our leaders, right, with a language of growth that they can use in their everyday work? But on this point, that big disruption that leaders should be ready for in future, which is the other question. I think the in human civilization, there will always be disruptions, and there are more than one. And for different people, the disruptions are different, and they are all big in some ways, the critical ones. Which is, again, I go back to why it's more and more important to focus on the mindset of see, leaders are leaders because they're successful. So you know about the principle of everyone being promoted to the leadership level that they are most incompetent in, right? I think there's a real genuine sense that leaders are constantly challenged with what they do not know more than what they know, right? And again, I want to say, again, I firmly believe that you can't put new wine in old wineskin, which is Nick's point earlier. It's really, really important. And on this, I think what is the one skill or the one competency that can help people to navigate the ongoing, constant, big disruptions? That's the more pertinent question. And again, with that, we go back to learning agility, having the right mindset, having the right muscles to attend to never-ending, constant disruptions in their life, so that they are able to craft the future together with their employees forward. I think that's really important. My last point would be to Nick's point, right? We need to think about, therefore, ourselves as learning professionals, not as just merely learning architects now. We got to think about us as employee architects, workforce architects. What does that mean? Learning, as we often espouse, is a process, not a destination, right? And to the wonderful analogy of a GPS, I think the new emerging technology that we're working towards is how do we, learning management systems and even learning experience platforms, which are the cutting trends of what we are engaging with in terms of technology in the L&D space. To me, I think these are relatively passé because they focus primarily on learning. I think the important thing is we want to focus on growth. And learning is an ongoing process and journey to bring you to growth. So what is that destinations, and destination changes and keeps growing. So talent mobility and talent intelligence platforms that make visible growth opportunities, role opportunities, internal and external, and how do you close those gaps is where we are talking about AI being a companion for you. And here, if you want to close this gap to this next destination in your growth journey as a professional, right? Here are the engagement opportunities, your learning opportunities. They can come in the form of programs, in classes, but more importantly, what are the gigs? What are the, explorations? What are the experiences? What are the networking opportunities that you might have? What are the mentors you can leverage on? This is, to me, the technology that we should be investing our time in building, so that we develop for a holistic employee experience and growth journey, rather than focusing primarily with fixity and rigidity only on learning as we know it to be today.
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer and Nick. It's been a pleasure hosting both of you and listening to you. Thank you for taking out time and discussing the different, learning development space, what all changes, transformations has gone through in the last 3 years, and what's in store for the future of work. Thank you once again, both of you.
My absolute
Thank you
pleasure.
both.
Look forward to seeing both of you at the conference in Singapore on 13th of April. Thanks a lot for being part of this discussion and for sharing all those insights with us.
Thank you.
Most
Enjoyed it.
welcome. See everyone.
Have a good day.
Have a good day.